It is instinctual to approach singing like, am I any good at it? Should I quit my day job? Will people like it? Will people not like it? Do I like it or don't I like it? And those things have some merit sometimes, but they're not the best way to learn singing. The best way to learn singing is to keep yourself in a creative, explorative mindset in which we don't judge the sound. And we say, I have a sonic universe at my disposal.
The voice teaching industry works on a myth that the best voice teachers can teach anyone. We're here to challenge that. Every teacher has a paradigm, which is a way of seeing, singing and learning that directs everything they do in the lesson ring. Some teachers know their paradigm, a lot don't. And singers pay the price in mismatched lessons. So we're having conversations with teachers about how they actually teach. Not their marketing pitch, but the real stuff. For episode 2, I'm talking with Justin Stoney, founder of New York Vocal Coaching and one of the most watched voices in vocal education online. But that's not why he's here. He's here because underneath all of those videos is a consistent philosophy. Vocal fold coordination as a starting point, joy as a non-negotiable, and customization as the method. Justin believes every lesson should end with a victory. He adapts his energy to the singer in front of him, calm when they need calm, fired up when they need firing up. And he's honest that no teacher, including himself, is the right fit for everyone. We cover why vocal folds are often the missing piece, the difference between a judgment mindset and a creative one, and what it actually means to deliver a victory every single lesson. Let's get over there. Okay, so Justin, here we are. We are in the room.
Hello,
Welcome.
Steve. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. We are so excited about this with your years of experience and expertise. For those people out there who don't know who you are, which is probably rare at this point in the singing industry, just in case, Justin Stoney has one of the most watched vocal education YouTube channels. But that isn't what really deeply interests us at We Help Singers. What interests us is the consistency of the technique behind the screen. And that starts with vocal fold coordination. There's a vowel into resonance piece. There's, I would say, fun, joy over theory, and simple cues that often bypass a lot of the overthinking that can happen in singing, to get singers to the singing part quicker. And so we obviously want to talk about that today and unravel it and see, who does that work for best, if there is a sort of bracket there, in what circumstances, and also if there's any circumstances where it may not work for someone, and what we should do about that at that time. But is that a fair summary, Justin?
I think it sounded like a great summary.
Okay, good. And obviously, at any point, please let me know if there's anything else in your sort of repertoire or toolkit that you think is really worth talking about. But if we can we start with that vocal fold piece? Because I see from watching your videos that we do return there quite a lot, and I'd love to know what it is about that for you that makes it such a North Star in your repertoire.
That is a North Star. I would say the reason why is because it tends to be the missing piece so often. Of course, not always. But when folks have the kind of voice lesson where they say, wow, I learned more in one lesson than I did in 4 years at school or 5 years taking voice lessons, how did you do that? It was the focus at the fold level that had been neglected. There had been talk about the breath, all good stuff. The alignment, all good stuff. The resonance, all good stuff. But a sort of ignoring of what the folds may or may not be capable of on their own. And the second the student starts to think, wow, I have some control there too, it very often is the missing link that makes it all work together. And I find that it's uncommon to talk that way and to think that way. And folks have sometimes even been in a situation where they were told, well, just relax, relax, relax. Don't think of anything in there. It must always stay relaxed. And then there's no agency in that key element of the entire system. So it isn't always my go-to. It just tends to be a focus because it has that game-changing element when it has been ignored.
Wonderful stuff. Thank you. On that, because that's such an important point you made about it seems to be somewhat missed. And I think there are a number of different topics like that in the singing industry that are sort of shoved to the side a little bit when they seem to have a lot of importance. Have you ever thought about why that might be? Why do you think it was something that seems that is so profound, so important that why do you think it is that for years and years it may not have had the attention that it should have had?
I don't know the reason, but I have some guesses. One guess that I have would be fear, actually. We all have a heart as vocal professionals to not harm the singer, and the vocal folds are the thing we, most importantly, don't want to harm. And I think it is very easy to sort of say, well, I don't want to mess with the vocal folds. I don't want to tell them to add compression or add strength. I don't want to think there because I might hurt something. It's a quote unquote safer bet to focus on the breath or focus on the resonance. Now, in truth, it's just as safe to focus on the folds, but I think folks often are a little careful when it comes to the teaching because they don't want to hurt something, and they're careful there when they need not. That's a guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hard to say. We don't know what others think, but that makes a lot of sense. And so on the fold thing, is that something that you hear? Obviously, it varies, but is that something a teacher can hear? And if so, what is it that they're listening for? What is it that singers should be listening for in their own voices for on the vocal fold front? And then, based on what they're hearing, what things could they do to guide themselves to a better situation if their goal, let's be clear, is to become a better technical singer?
Absolutely. Can we hear the vocal folds? Can we learn to hear the vocal folds? Absolutely. And it really comes down to two simple things to be listening for. One, the breathiness versus adduction. You can sort of hear if things are a little too tight or a little bit too loose. Now, sometimes those qualities are desirable, but there's an in-between that we can find, and that in-between requires the folds to do it. We don't want it to be a breath thing. We don't want it to be a resonance thing. We want the folds to make the adjustment. The other one we want to be listening for is, let's call it the headiness versus chestiness of it all. I know there's many more technically accurate terms, but I think a lot of us use head and chest, and a lot of students do as well. So you're listening for the chestiness versus headiness of the sound, and particularly when it's, let's say, chesty, not having to get loud to achieve it. When we are getting loud to achieve the M1-ness of it all, then we know that the breath over-participated. And we want to be able to achieve that task without so much of the breath pressure. When that task is achieved without the breath pressure, we know that we've had greater responsibility for the registration at the fold level.
So the last piece there, yeah, that was awesome, because we're really talking about a synergy between the airflow and the vocal fold being able to behave against that air pressure, physics, I suppose. So with that in mind, would it be right to summarize that as the vocal folds may not know exactly what we need them to do as a singer right off the bat, and so what we go through a process to guide them to do the thing, and then and part of that is this balance with this subglottal pressure. And if someone is there thinking, okay, so I need to get this this balance between two things that are inside me. What do I? How can I go about that? How long will it take me? I guess again we have to be fair here. This is without having context, and everyone's starting at a different place. But what are your any thoughts on that?
Well, I'll say it in this simple way. I think it's simple. We all, at some point, have this issue where we're going up and we wanted to stay connected. We wanted to stay in a chest coordination, or you're going to talk about M1. All of those things could mean the same thing. Staying connected, being chesty, being in M1, you could potentially use those interchangeably. But we want to keep that. We want to go up higher and we want to keep it. We don't want to, flip into another registration. So how do we do it at first? At first, to not, crack, I take a big breath. I use big pressure. My larynx raises up. My mouth goes wide and I'm pushing everything. The question then becomes, did the vocal folds ultimately need all that help? And the answer is no. You don't have to take a big breath. You don't have to use a big breath and get loud. You don't have to raise your larynx. And you don't have to do something wide and open with your resonance. In fact, you can do it with a small breath. You can do it quietly. You can do it with a lowered larynx. And you can do it with really tiny resonance strategies as well. So over time, we take what started with a and we refine it. How long does the refinement take? A lifetime in one sense, because we're always getting better and better. But we hope with good technique and good instruction that getting some sort of result that we want is actually pretty fast. It can happen in a matter of weeks or months for some, and it can happen in a matter of a year or two for others. But it's not 5 or 10 years. We can get it fairly quickly if we do the right work.
Mm-hmm. I love the way that you frame that, because it's a way I think similarly on a lot of times, and that is, as humans, we've evolved. Obviously, for staying alive is the main reason. Well, that's our main job, so to speak, when as living people, and then but of course, then we want to thrive and want to do cool things. That doesn't mean to say that the body's ready to adjust to those things we want to do, and I sense that was what you were going towards then. So what we end up doing is we get into different modes, and some of the setups that we create with the mechanisms that create great singing often are sort of misaligned with the job of doing the singing thing because of the other use cases we have in our lives. And so I love that you pointed towards that. And so are there any things that you have noticed with, and we don't have to stick on the vocal fold thing here, it'd be good to if we can, but we can pivot, that you see in humans that they've either accumulated in their life that isn't assisting, and it's pretty common, something that they're doing where that isn't going to assist you, and anything that that you feel is something that you can jump on really quickly and say, yeah, you're doing that right now because most people do. We want to get you to this place because we understand that for vocal efficiency, or if that's our goal, then we know the sort of setup that you require. So, and this is how we're going to fill that gap. If you could speak to that.
Absolutely. Well, if we're talking more technically, I don't know that I think that there's a go-to. My modus operandi is customization. I try to look at each person as an absolute individual with their unique set of thoughts, learning styles, goals, habits, sounds that they're attracted to. And as far as technique is concerned, some people push the breath, some people don't push it enough. Some people raise the larynx too much, some people lower it too far. Some people overcompress the chords, some people undercompress the chords. Some people love big, bright, wide resonances, others like to have a darker. I mean, you can't say until you're in the moment. But to answer the question, there is a tendency that I see that's a little less technical, that seems to be rather universal. And that is being in a judgment mindset versus a creative mindset. And this is an absolute essential for vocal mastery. It is instinctual to approach singing like, am I any good at it? Should I quit my day job? Will people like it? Will people not like it? Do I like it or don't I like it? And those things have some merit sometimes, but they're not the best way to learn singing. The best way to learn singing is to keep yourself in a creative, explorative mindset in which we don't judge the sound. And we say, I have a sonic universe at my disposal. I can try this sound, that one, and the other one, and it's all good. They're all fun. They're all interesting. And when we're in a explorative mindset instead of a right and wrong mindset, interestingly, we can do more and we can do it better, faster. And then when we go back to the judgment mindset, we say, wow, I did pretty good, didn't I?
Yeah, the psychology behind that makes so much sense. And is there anything there for you that you, in reality, practically speaking, I can imagine there are, in fact, I've come across it, there are humans that want to sing, and however much we want to press a button on the side of the head and say, now think creatively, don't judge yourself. I guess singing and performing is inherently based on judgment. Essentially, you walk out on a stage, and whether it's impossible or it's just really hard to get away from, hey, everyone who's come to see me, what do you think? There's got to be an element there. But what are some things that you have at your disposal if someone's really struggling with that concept of, I don't need to be a perfectionist. I'm really sad about the way that I'm sounding right now, and I want it to be different.
It is not an encouragement, but a truth that you have a one-of-a-kind, you could say God-given instrument that has never been heard in the history of mankind and will never be heard again. That's true. Every voice is literally a one-of-a-kind. So when we approach our singing with that in mind, it feels like a gift, like a privilege to be able to do this. It doesn't matter if you're a top star or a beginner. There's no voice like yours. None. There never has been and there never will be. And that truth is very empowering because in some sense, it doesn't matter how great you are. There will likely always be somebody better and there likely will always be somebody not as good. But what matters is you, your self-expression, and the fact that that self-expression comes through a one-of-a-kind instrument. I mean, I've got this Yamaha piano here. I've got another one actually on the floor below. I have the exact same piano, and they sound exactly the same. But when Steve goes to sing, there's only one Steve. And when Justin goes to sing, there's only one Justin. Rooting ourselves deeply in that truth, not encouragement, truth, is very powerful. Then we also need to look to our favorite singers. Are any of them perfect? Nope. In fact, the idiosyncrasies and often the flaws, as they, in quotes, flaws, are the things that we love the most about that singer's voice. Finally, we've heard the quote, to err is human. And that's an interesting quote, and we kind of know it. To make mistakes is to be human. Humans make mistakes. To err is human. But I like to emphasize the human part of that. To err is human. Highlight human. Singing is the most distinctly human thing that you can do, or one of the top. How can you think of something more human than to sing? And so if we want to be great at singing, that includes the error, that includes the imperfection. I mean, you mentioned AI. AI voices, while they may have some merit, at the core is detestable. It's detestable to think of these sort of perfect robot voices. It's so anti-human. We want the flaws, we want the errors, we want the imperfections. That is, to err is human. We want that. So we've got a one-of-a-kind gift. We've got this opportunity, and we celebrate the fact that not all singers are perfect. That's the beauty of it. So those are a few thoughts. I could probably go on that topic.
I can feel it. I've got a question for you on that, because this is something that, that's been really interesting to me. But on the AI thing, if we are to bring up Suno, I think is probably the one most people know.
Uh-huh.
What's interesting to me is in this time that we're all currently living through as a species, there's something about AI. Some of the and it seems to I've noticed that it seems to be covers of an original song done in a different way. That seems to be interesting to people, but there definitely is an area and maybe a subset of person that does actually enjoy the output of what AI is doing right now. But then there is clearly, and we would guess to say that there's a bigger bunch of people that are who are on a spectrum of it needs to go away and never come back again. To it's just it's somewhat sad that it seems to be detracting from the human nature. There's a conflict in there somewhere, and I wonder where it's going to lead. I wonder whether we just evolve into actually feeling, if we're having this conversation in 75 years, hopefully we can. But if we are, then maybe we'd be saying, that was just a moment we had to live through for us to adapt through, and we thought we liked the whole human thing, but in fact, the humans created this thing that created an even better thing that led on to this thing that made it that created amazing art.
Like I said, I don't think it's without merits, and I'm sure there are people who find it filled with merits. But one thing that I know can never go away is the human spirit. That is not something that can be trifled with. And so whether it's a smartphone or a computer or Google or AI, it's not that the thing is inherently good or bad or evil. It is how it's used. And I think we can all agree that AI has a good use and potentially a very, very bad use. And if we can continue to cherish the human spirit, that thing about us all that can never be taken, AI is just another in the series of tools that we've had throughout all of human history that can be used for good or ill.
On the human spirit side of things, I'd love to speak to you about this, because it's something that I've actually personally struggled with in my whole life, is connecting with the human spirit. That's a sad thing to say, but it's kind of true.
Yeah.
And actually more so, there would be things, and I'll be honest with you, actually, as I struggle with it personally, it's definitely something that it's definitely one of the areas in my teaching that is for sure neglected for rightly or wrongly. It's not something I go towards because I don't even understand it myself. But as you say, it's important to some people, and especially I see, especially youngsters. I'm very sort of analytical and function based, and that doesn't necessarily. If we were to look at ratios of successful lessons, I should be teaching less children. Because of the comprehension levels and what kids are interested in, and do you know what? I realised that mostly when I saw my wife teach, who is a absolute child whisperer, and and when I saw her teach, I was like, what am I even doing? But on that note, though, I do, it's not something that I address a lot, but I do see in them. I see, okay, yeah, you are struggling with this. You hear Ariana Grande sing, or you've just went and watched Wicked, and you come in and you want to do the same thing, and in fact, you want to sound just like it. And we all, I mean, I'm completely with you on. Well, for one thing, there's the fact that Ariana Grande has years and years of experience and training. But the other thing is as you say, anatomically, you are completely different. There's a spectrum there, but you are completely different. So the chances of you doing what she's doing are very, very slim, especially in this moment. But that attachment to, but I want to, and if I don't do that, when I walk out on stage and I don't sound like her, or I don't sound as the audience would like me to sound, and let's just put a bracket around that. It might be a clean sound with vibrato on sustains, which seems to be something most audiences perk up to. They've got that in their mind, but we're thinking, forget it. Forget that. You're a beautiful human being. You've got a wonderful instrument. It may not function and do the things you want it to do at the moment, but how do we get them out of that funk? Is there a particular
Well,
sort of strategy you have to?
there are certainly ways. First of all, let's look to the desire to imitate. This is something that we've often been taught is a negative, and I was taught that it was a negative until I discovered years later what a positive. To find vocal heroes and to say, can I match what they're doing? So let's say that the student is copying Ariana Grande and they're doing a rather good job. I mean, they can't be her, but they're finding her nuances and details quite well. Well, we can say, guess what? You're wonderful at imitating. That's a great skill. Now, who are some other artists that inspire you? And let's imitate them. And if you imitated just one person, what if we made it 10? What if we made it 25? And now you have found inspiration and cues and ideas and styles from a multitude of artists. And then put that all together. Now the singer is quite skilled. Then we go again to the human spirit and we say, now, why do you love these songs? What do they make you feel? What do you have to say? How can you say it through the song? How can you express yourself, your emotions, your story through this music? And then that attaches them to a part of their self-expression that cannot be imitated. When you're talking about falling in love your way, when you're talking about seeking revenge your way, when you're talking about how to inspire your best friend your way, there is no chance that that sounds the way any of those other artists did. So in that sense, it's quote unquote easy, but it is a process often to get to that place.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. You're saying that you're essentially using instructions tools that, in this case, it's the let's use other singers, but an array of singers for you to be guided by.
Yes.
In order to achieve the outcome. It's sort of obvious for teaching, but instead of, I guess, in this situation, we see the sad singer, and we almost just want to address the psychology directly. But in fact, you're using tools to skirt around it and to create the outcome on the back end, so to speak.
You could create the outcome on the back end. If they're sad in the moment, though, we don't need to skirt around that. There is always something to celebrate. Always. And when I'm working with voice teachers and they ask me, Justin, what does a successful lesson look like? My first instinct is not to go to the technical. The technical is a given. Victory is the key word to a good voice lesson. The student has to walk out of there with a victory every time. That's what I pride myself on. That's what I teach others to pride themselves on, is to give the student the victory. Now, what a victory looks like to each student is different, and that's the fun, that's the challenge. But you need to make sure that in every lesson, they have been challenged somewhat, but not so much that they're defeated. Or if they're in a sad state of affairs, then we certainly can't challenge them. At this point, we have to highlight what they're doing well, why they're doing well, what they can continue to do to have that success, to have that victory. So that's our bread and butter, is delivering the victory. So if they're sad in the moment, we got to make sure we pull them out of that, remind them what they're doing so beautifully.
I'm not sure, how much direct teaching you do these days, but with everything you've
A
got going
lot.
on. Oh, do you really? Okay.
More than you can possibly imagine. I'm a little,
Sure.
I'm a little bit of a psychopath with this stuff. Yeah, I teach so much.
Right. So yeah, that's good to hear. So you're living and breathing it, and so
Always.
there is science that suggests that as a human, we actually do find it very hard to adapt to the inputs that we're receiving in a quick manner. And especially when we consider the array of, as you mentioned earlier on, the array of singing archetypes, the mindset of singers, where they are in their journey, how they consume information to learn epistemology, all of the many variations of what that person can be walking in. The science suggests that we're actually, it's hard for us to change what we personally are leading with, and that clearly starts with sort of beliefs and philosophies, biases are sort of formed off the back of that, our communication style, and our and the tools we use. I mean, I actually think this is why you go on any voice teacher forum on Facebook, and that's why you see the chaos on these forums, is because everyone is doing something different, and that's beautiful. But there's a million and one things that we can be doing, and arguably none of it is right and none of it is wrong. So with that in mind, but I will be watching you and listening to you talk, Justin. You really do seem like someone who really it is multidimensional, and really can adapt more than most, I would say. Obviously, you're not a machine. You're not AI. But so
Are you sure, Steve?
Actually,
I don't know.
I'm not.
Might not be sure.
I can't be sure. Who knows?
You can't be sure.
Yeah. What am I? No one knows. But but with that in mind, if let's just say your next lesson, you think ahead to your next lesson today, tomorrow, whenever it might be, and imagine you're in that lesson, that person walks in. Are there any common threads with the direction in which you're going to take that, outside of labeling someone and I'm going to take you this way even if I don't know I know you're not going to do that, but are there any common threads in your teaching approach or methodology that you can speak to?
Customization, I mentioned this before,
Mm-hmm.
is always my go-to. I'm trying to take this person on this day and say, how can I design my very best voice lesson for you today? And again, that's the fun of it and the challenge both. But you don't know before the student walks in what kind of lesson it's going to be. So you can't plan, you can't prepare. You have to live in the moment with the student. And of course, our approach, in my belief, should adapt from person to person, but again, also day to day. So if I have a really high-strung, anxious performer or student, the lessons may look a lot more calm and zen, typically. Or if I have, let's say, a very low-energy individual and they need a lot of firing up, I become a crazy lunatic and it's a really fast-paced lesson. And I try to work with the energies that be from person to person. But that also needs to have day to day, because a student could come in and they have a big audition coming up, or they're under the weather today, or they didn't sleep very well, or they heard a new singer and they really want to focus on this new goal, this new idea, this new style. Sometimes my singers say, Justin, give me an hour of technique. I want to just do technique work and that's it. Sometimes they say, I want to just do songs today because I really want to focus on this piece of music. I don't know. what I try to do is take person by person, day by day, and deliver what is the best voice lesson possible for that person that day. And one thing that I think is important to say is I am a voice lesson lover. When I was 15 years old and I took my first voice lesson, every week looking forward to that lesson, it was like the greatest hour of my life. I just craved, I couldn't wait for the next lesson. And even to this day, receiving a voice lesson is such a beautiful thing. And so I humbly feel that I'm a connoisseur of voice lessons. I know what I would want to have. I know what it would be the greatest lesson for me. And so I try to get in touch with the person and think, what would be the greatest possible voice lesson for them? And what would be the best possible lesson for them today? And that's the sole focus. And again, that's a challenge, but that's the fun of it. It is almost like a puzzle or a game. Teaching voice feels like a game to me. Why I can teach ungodly amounts of hours, because it's fun. It feels like a fun game where we get to work together to unpack what makes your ideal vocal hour today. And we find it.
Just excellent. Well, you touched upon energy there. I don't need to outline your energy to anyone because they can see it and feel it.
Uh-huh.
And that is really is something that we've been thinking a lot about here at our school. And one of the things actually my wife says is so when we do teacher training, which I want to talk to you about because I know that you work with a lot of teachers and do a lot of teacher training. When we're working with teachers, we really do recognize the energy aspect here. And the fact that, and this is, how vague is that? What does energy even mean? But there does seem to be, and maybe this is the human spirit thing, so maybe I do think about it. But there seems to be osmosis, and I say I watched my wife do it, and from day one I was sold. And she says, relating to the point that you said about when you had your lessons, and that is so vivid in your mind that you remember what it was for you, and you want to give that to the people. And she said the same thing, which is, I want these kids to be at home thinking, I can't wait to go back on Monday.
Yes.
And that's because a lot of it is because that's how she felt and like you felt. So the tricky thing seems to come when you know that's such an important piece, but what is it? How do you have any words or tactics or tools or guidance for other teachers who may not even, firstly, understood that this is an important thing? They may, and there's no right or wrong here, but their mode might be, come on in, okay, let's do some scales, cool, see ya, and that'll work for some people, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure how many, but it worked for some people. But
Okay.
clearly, what you're so aware of the fact that your energy, your empathy, the way in which you interact with the person, it's a relationship, really matters. And so, and you can modify yourself for that. So how do you teach that? How do you guide other teachers to get to that place?
I do teach that there's room in this world for 10,000 great voice teachers in the same way that there's room in this world for 10,000 great singers. Voice teaching is decidedly not a competition. And in fact, anybody like competing at voice teaching, it's just your reaction has to be like, well, that's weird. Wait a minute. Let me be better at helping others than you. Like, what? So voice teaching decidedly not a competition. And singing, I think, even though we have singing competitions out there, is decidedly not a competition. So what I'm saying is I can admire 10,000 great singers and all of the different ways they do it in the same way as I can admire 10,000 great voice teachers and all the great ways there are to do it. So I would never want somebody to teach like me or try to do it the Justin Stoney way. That's not only am I not interested in that, I know that's not going to work. The only way you can be great at teaching voice is to teach like you. And like I said, to customize the lesson for the person that you're teaching. That's the only way. So I don't know that one should try to adopt my ways, but love is still essential.
Mm.
I talked about why I loved the voice lessons, and that has helped me to be successful as a teacher. There ought not be any voice teachers that don't have a love for singing. That is not, in my opinion, compatible. If you don't love singing and you're a voice teacher, that's not a match. Thankfully, I would say that's a very rare thing. Almost all of us have something about this thing called singing that we just love. For some, it's more the technical. For some, it's more the scientific. For some, it's more the spiritual. For some, it's more the physical. For some, it's more the emotional. But there's something that you love, and you used the term North Star before. I love that. You can take that love that you have for singing and the craft and use that as a North Star for your teaching. Just because not every student loves singing for the reasons that you love it doesn't mean you can't keep that North Star as a key aspect of your teaching. You can come to the piano, you can come to the job every day because of the love, and then still adapt to the ways that other people love it. And maybe that even inspires us to love it in a different way than we did before, a deeper way.
Mm-hmm. And I think that combined with in tandem with a real, I've noticed this, those who, you mentioned love of singing, but a love of people as well, and that may sound very twee, and I'm honestly not normally that twee, but that is something that I really recognise, is that, yeah, that one of the most beautiful things in this world is the relationships we have, and so I really feel any relationship that you go into from the start, um, expectations. Everyone does things differently, and in the singing, that's for sure true. But if we can outline our expectations on our side and make that very clear, so that we can potentially get a decent alignment, I think that's a great way. And a lot of that, I think, comes from a love of people and a love of wanting people to succeed as well. And I'm not sure that's always the case. And everyone's got different reasons for doing things, but I guess that's, that definitely makes the world go round, and people have different outcomes. But on that, I'd love to just I'd love to drop a bomb, Justin.
Drop the bomb. Let's drop that thing.
So the bomb is there some truth in the fact that some teachers are better for some singers, especially now in the world we live, when it's international and you can work with anyone at any time across the world? We're no longer in this in our villages where there's the one teacher in the village and they collect all of the singers because they're the only singer, and they need their job to be a singing teacher, so they have to be paid. So I'm going to get as many singers as I can into my studio. And I'm not saying that's the only reason why people do things, but I think there's a bit of that in there. And then now we've got this international thing where anyone can have a lesson with anyone. We've got all of these different philosophies and beliefs and domains of teachers, and also connecting students who, for me, let's for example, when I first started singing lessons, my biggest struggle was coming out of sports training. I had a real issue, and I had a struggle. I was really wrestling with the teaching approach of which I had at college. I remember at college, imagine you're doing this while singing this song. And I said, and in my mind, I'm thinking, all I'm thinking about is that it kind of hurts and I'm clattering into this note, which isn't the one I want to sing. So personally, for me, I had a really hard time using that method, and it didn't really matter what kind of the things I said or fed back. The lesson continued in the same fashion, and to a point where I almost got to a point where I guess we don't work. 6 lessons down the line, and I paid a bit of money. I guess I learned something along the way, but could my money and time been spent somewhere else with someone who says, I am very analytical, and I have this methodology where it's like sports training. You do this thing enough times over the next 6 months, guess what? It's going to change. 'Cause that works for me. And so there's the bomb. It's I was personally in a situation where I was working with, I would say, not the optimal guidance I could have had as a singer at that moment in time. And so, as an industry, should we look at that and should we go, regulations seem to be hard to come by because who's the gatekeeper? But could we be more honest about what we do as teachers? And therefore, singers would have a better idea of who they would be better suited to.
I don't think that any given teacher can be a fit for every singer in the world, of course. Do we need to be honest about what we do? I think so. I don't think we should represent ourselves as being the best teacher for every student. And I think we should talk about the things that we believe in and our mission and the things that we focus on with singers. If a singer is not having a good experience with a teacher, they're not having a good time, they're not receiving the results that they want, and the teacher is not able to adapt their ways to the singer, they need not stay with that teacher. There is another teacher that will be better.
I'm going to jump in a sec. I love that Justin said this, as is at the heart of what we do at We Help Singers. But after recording, I realised that he stayed somewhat general, and I wanted him to get specific. So after recording, I asked him, who specifically would you refer elsewhere? Here's what he said.
There's several circumstances where I would refer a singer to somebody else. One example is distortions, rasp and distortion. I do teach it, but on my staff, Nicholas Ormazabal is one of the world's leading experts. If somebody wants to sing heavy metal, something like that, I say, you gotta see Nicholas. Another would be selecting musical theater repertoire. I can do it, but it's not really my thing. I'm more into technique. So if somebody says, Justin, help me build my book, I'm going to refer them to somebody on my staff who really specializes in musical theater repertoire. Or if somebody wants to do Italian diction for their opera song, that's not really my world. I'm going to find a coach in New York City that specializes in Italian diction. These are just some examples.
I do think that so much of what we do can be customized, like I mentioned. You can work with more singers than you might believe if you are willing to be adaptable in your ways. But that does come to a limit. I'm positive there are teachers out there that are a far better fit than I am for that person. Or for you, Steve, I mean, we can only teach the people who come to us and say, I'm getting a great voice lesson here. I'm getting those victories that I mentioned before, and I'm really happy with this fit. Those are our students.
Mm-hmm. Could I? Yeah, absolutely. Cause I've done it on the other side of things in lessons over the years. I mean, I've been doing this 25 years now, and especially in the early days, the ratio of that just didn't. I know they walked away thinking, and I don't like that feeling, that's for sure. And to what I've done over the years, I've definitely I sort of reverse engineer the students who we just click, and you know, when you walk out the back end of the lesson, you think, yeah, that there was in both of our eyes success there, and you can feel that thing. And so it's a really interesting area that I really appreciate you speaking to it. Another one of your things that I've noticed is joy.
Mm-hmm.
And clearly it was your book was I would say in some ways based on that principle.
Yes.
And I just wondered, it sounds silly to say, but it's still a choice of yours to lead with that. And so what is it about joy that you specifically think is why it's a requirement in what we do as or what you do as a teacher?
Joy is to me essential because of what I believe joy to be. Joy is different than happiness. Joy is something that you can access regardless of whether you are in a time of happiness or sadness, triumph or grief. You can be very, very sad. You can be grieving and still have access to joy. It transcends happy and sad. There's something else that transcends happy and sad, and that is singing. Singing is something that we do for celebration, for sorrow, for community, for worship, etc. It's transcendent of feelings, even though it's deeply connected to feelings. It's transcendent because you can connect to any feeling via singing. And joy can be found in any season of life. So singing and joy go hand in hand. To me, they are not separable. Singing brings joy, regardless of the season. And I tell a story often in my classes of a time when I was in a rock band in high school. And we were in the basement having a jam session, writing songs, making music. And our singer-guitarist gets a call, leaves the room, and he comes back in, and his face is white. We say, Josh, what happened, man? What's going on? And he had gotten a call that afternoon that his mom was very, very ill, out of the blue. Young woman, healthy woman, very ill. And sadly, she passed away a couple months after that call. And when he came in white-faced and told us this news, we said, what do you want to do? Do you want to cancel? Do you want us to leave? Do you want to talk about this? What do you want us to do? What do you need from us? And he looks at us and he says, I just want to rock. And this guy gets on the microphone and lets out sounds that I have never heard before in my life. I will never forget that day because I've been teaching a long time too. And I heard a lot of sounds in my vocal travels. Never something like that day. He just needed to rock. And that's what singing is. It's this gift where regardless of the moment, regardless of the feeling, regardless of the season, we can connect to something higher. That's what joy is too.
Well, I mean, I could listen to you tell stories like that all day, Justin.
Thank you. Thank you.
But it's absolutely wonderful. But the on that, the joy, you mentioned there's something in there. I guess the punchline is for me, with your faith, with your connection with the human spirit, and as you mentioned there, your friend, and you witnessed that, and there's no denying what happened. One of the things in the industry that we come across a lot is the we just wish there wasn't this, as you mentioned earlier on, this divides in any walk of life, in any part of life. That'd be amazing. But there does seem to be a little bit of, I'm the science guys, I'm the anecdotal guys, and it seems to me that you work towards a good balance of all. How do you navigate that in your teaching across the board? When do you choose science is the thing I'm going to be guided by versus your experience?
Well, that's a great question, Steve. I find it disappointing that those things are at odds because to me, they absolutely are not and absolutely do not need to be. You can be a deeply spiritual person and a deeply scientific person. And those things, to me, are gloriously compatible. They go hand in hand, really. And if we look back through history, the scientists were very often the people of faith. And the reason for science was because of the divine. We want to unpack more and more of the miraculous divine universe that we believe in and witness. And so to have them be at odds is very, very regrettable. And like I say, it need not be that way. You can be profoundly spiritual and a believer and a person of faith and a believer in miracles and an observer of energies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and deeply committed to science. I think that I know that they can go hand in hand, and I would hope that people would see it that way more and more, because historically it's been that way, and it's really only a modern idea that they need to be at odds at all.
Yes, I'm with you on that. That's for sure. Now, just to work down a different path for a second, YouTube, because you're good at that, and so you're probably the best person to ask at this point. What is, what are your thoughts on knowing after watching your YouTube videos over the years? I've noticed that you will, in moments, hold your hand up and say, "Of course," in some ways, of course I don't know, because I can't hear you, right? Or we'd love to, and I've heard you say, it really is time for you to get someone to listen to you, to see what you're doing there to help you out.
Yeah.
It seemed to me, and again, the Naked Vocalist back in the day, the podcast that Chris and I did, we wrestled with this a lot. The principle that we have to be vague because we don't know. we can't give absolutes, because if I give an absolute, it's definitely not going to work for someone. So, how do you? This is a two-part question. How do you manage that? And also, do you think that the value in that medium is more or less than an in-person lesson? Or does it have different value? And what is that value if that's the case?
It has less value, in my opinion. And in several episodes from the beginning of doing what I have done, I say, get with a great voice teacher in your area, because I don't think that videos and episodes on any platform like that can replace the experience of working one-on-one with professional guidance. And I never meant for it to replace that. I think it can be a helpful supplement, because sometimes you just really want to hear a professional break down technical concepts and offer suggestions, offer encouragement, offer some ideas. That's what it's there for, to try to encourage and to try to help folks as it can. But I would never say that it should replace voice lessons with a trusted, caring vocal professional. I always think of that as the most valuable thing a singer can have.
Right, and I even think with the right intention, it is a window into what people can do. Again, as long as we have that intention of, I'm actually aware of what I do as a teacher, and I'm going to execute this. That's probably the wrong word. I'm going to deliver this video in a way that displays that, so that anybody in the world, that if they get a snippet of what I'm about, that will possibly guide them to say, I should probably spend some time with that person. And so again, on that basis, I think it's a fantastic thing. So I think we get into the I've got one more question for you.
Sure.
Let's imagine everyone in the world was never going to see you again after today.
Mm-hmm.
A really sad thought, but they weren't going to see you, and they were, after today, they were going to go to Spain, go and live in a cave on the beach, and never speak to anybody else again, or any singing teachers. Weirdly, they really want to get their voice working really well, and they want to be able to produce the sounds that they want to produce. Given that you have one thing that you can tell them to give them a really decent chance of attaining what they need to attain, what would that advice be?
So let me get this straight. I am
Sure.
wiped out off the face of the earth,
Sure.
gone from existence and memory, and the singer has moved to Spain and is going into a cave, yet they still have advice from me in order to try to improve their singing? Did I get the circumstance right?
The final words they hear, you were 98% there. The final words they hear before they go on their mission to the cave in solitude is the words out of your mouth. What would you say to them?
I'd say caves have really good acoustics. Enjoy.
Is there and then they go, then they say, thanks, that's awesome. But I guess I'll find that out when I get there. What is if I'm worried that I'm not going to achieve my singing greatness whilst I'm in that cave? What can you tell me? The last words of wisdom to set me on my pathway to vocal greatness.
I would say good riddance to your pursuit of singing greatness, because there's something so much more valuable than the pursuit of singing greatness, which is singing itself. Get in that cave and explore the sonic universe, all of the noises that you have the opportunity to make. Go play, go enjoy, go experiment, but dispense with greatness and instead relish and cherish the gift of sonic creativity. That's what I'd say.
Wow. And I'll be honest with you, I thought you were going to stop with that good riddance. And I thought, this is the side of Justin we haven't seen before. He's got really angry in his final days. He's got really angry.
That's right. That's it.
Yeah. But no, honestly though, what a wonderful way to finish there. That is advice that I think anybody can take on board and live their life with. So thank you so much for that. Is there anything else that you want to add about the singing industry or singers or teaching in at this current moment?
I just want to say thank you to you, Steve, for having me on this show, for doing what you're doing, for helping, for contributing. I haven't been teaching as long as you. This is my 21st year. I just celebrated my 20th anniversary. But I can recall 20 years ago how close-minded everybody was, or it seemed, at least in comparison to today. Nobody wanted to give, nobody wanted to share, nobody wanted to collaborate. And everybody was, as I mentioned before, sort of more competitive. I mean, it still exists, but it seemed more when I began. And doing my show on YouTube was in some ways a response to that. I thought that was sad, how nobody wanted to share. And I said, well, I want to be one that shares. I don't care if you're not going to share. I'll share. But I'm really encouraged the way that has changed, that there's so much more open-mindedness and communication and collaboration and just willingness to share. And you are demonstrating that with what you're doing here. And I'm thankful that you asked me to be a part of that.
Well, thank you so much. It really has been a pleasure, and right back at you. You know, the feeling is completely mutual. So, yeah, once again, thank you for your time. And anybody out there who's listening to this and wants to get in touch with Justin, you might find it tricky these days to get in touch with Justin. But but where should they find you if they need to get in touch with me? I mean, obviously, you're going to be on the website. This episode will be there on the wehelpsingers.com website. But
yeah, the main way to find me is through my company. My company is called New York Vocal Coaching, and our website is newyorkvocalcoaching.com. And most of what you might need to find is right there. So that's probably the best way.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Justin.
Yeah, no, thank you, Steve.
Appreciate you. Cheers.
Thanks.
That was Justin Stoney, someone who's clearly thought deeply about what makes the voice lesson actually work. What I take away from the conversation is the idea of victory. Not technical perfection, not some external standard, but making sure the singer walks out with something they didn't have when they walked in. That's a measuring stick worth remembering. Justin also said something that sits at the heart of what we do at We Help Singers. He said, I don't think we should represent ourselves as being the best teacher for everyone. That's rare honesty in an industry that often rewards the opposite. So if you're curious whether Justin's approach fits how you learn, his full profile is at wehelpsingers.com, including his paradigm fingerprint and how to reach him. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another teacher, another paradigm. See you soon.